11.
Oh my god. First the Spider-Man thing on Twitter, now this. Is there no low you won't sink to?
Well, I have another rant for you that's not related to anything we were just talking about.
Perfect. Great segue. Go straight to that. What's that?
Okay. Do you remember group discussions in high school?
Yeah.
Do you remember how awful they were? Like in English class when we're discussing like a topic from The Great Gatsby, or if in whatever, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how cringe they were? How awful they were?
Because no one wanted to talk. Like everyone would sit around in a circle, and then they would go, all right, who's going to go next? And then everyone would be dead silent, and then the teacher had to start calling on people because no one wanted to participate.
Well, I have news that it's not any better in college, because I've had them in my classes, and they're still terrible.
Oh, fantastic.
Do you want to know what... Do you know if I were a professor or a teacher, and I had group discussions, do you know what 3 words I would ban?
What?
Quicker than an instant.
Going
off of.
Oh, yeah. Well, going off of what Daniel said, I feel like, he's right. Well, going off of what Marcus said. Yeah, well, I think that too. Going off of what John said, I think he's totally right. He brought up a good point, and, going off of what Cindy said.
I hate that so much. Do you get it? Do you understand?
No, I totally get it. That's 100% accurate. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Nobody has ever said anything worth saying after the 3 words going off of what blank person said.
Going off of that idea.
Because, first of all, you're not really saying anything of your own. You're commenting on what somebody else said. But second of all, you're going into this rabbit hole where you're diving away from the main topic and you're discussing what other people say instead of what you're supposed to be discussing. So it can allow you to get from a point to discussing the altruism in early Christian fathers in a history class to discussing whether those same Christian fathers were communist or not. Well, going off of this, the communism, blah, 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 and I was just like...
I feel like maybe this is kind of like a perfect metaphor for how conversations have gone recently. That people, instead of talking about the main focus of the conversation, just get hung up on one detail and then really, really ride you about that one instead of the thing they should be talking about.
I mean, that's not missing the point at all. Yeah, I just hate it when people do that sort of argument in college. I mean, we're in college. You're supposed to be doing stuff at a higher level than you were in high school, but you're still doing stupid stuff like going off of.
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of people have this weird assumption that by the time we get to college, there will be like a little bit more of an adult treatment of things. Like everyone will be more mature. Everyone will be a little bit smarter about this stuff. That's not the case at all. Everyone acts pretty much exactly how they did in high school. There's no improvement. It's really just like same shit, different campus.
Well, there's also been also the experience going from high school to college has been that one of degradation for me, because I didn't know which of the dorms was which one when I was signing up this year, so I got stuck in the jock dorm. So yeah.
Oh no! I bet you listen to people talk about Star Wars all day.
Yeah. I want to talk. There's another thing that I can rant about that's not related to anything that's currently happening right now that I'm not going to mention because I don't want to piss people off. But there was like a few earlier in the school year. I was sitting with some people who were on my floor, and they defended the Star Wars prequels as good movies.
Oh, jeez.
I thought that was the one thing that we could all agree on when it came to Star Wars, is that the prequels are bad.
There was apologists for a little while there. Then Mr. Plinkett basically nuked all of Star Wars culture with his bajillion views per video reviews. And it became cool to hate on them for a little while. And then the new series came out, and everyone's talking about those ones now. But I feel like they're like Star Wars prequel apologists are finally taking their time to slink back in and go, well, it's not that bad, you guys. I mean, there were some cool special effects at least.
And it's a really good, involving story.
The fight scenes were at least really interesting,
Well, they don't even go with at least the fight scenes were interesting. They go with they're genuinely good movies. Oh, like the writing's bad, but the story is really good. The story is not good. It's awful.
I can't understand this strange logic of the writing is bad, but the story is good.
Mm-hmm.
That's like saying this food tastes bad, but I enjoy eating it. It's like, what? What if it tastes bad? Why are you eating it?
Yeah, it's like, this drug is making me sick, but I'm getting healthier.
I keep throwing up, but I'm probably healthy.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense, doesn't it?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's just flawless logic.
It is the flawlessest logic.
Flawlessest.
Indeed. In diddly doodly doddly deed.
Do you want to just talk about the thing?
What thing? Stranger Things?
Yeah, Stranger Things. I just got done with season 2. So did you.
Yeah, I got done only
some
because
people are going to be mad and be like, well, it's Stranger Things 2, not Stranger Things Season 2. Get it
I call
right.
it Stranger Things Season 2 because calling it a sequel is dumb if it's a TV show. Because, yes, technically Episode 2 is a sequel to Episode 1, but they're all episodes, so it doesn't really matter. You can only say 2 when it's a movie, and Stranger Things is not a movie.
Are you sure about that? Stranger Things kind of feels like a movie, just like a 9-hour movie.
Like a 9-hour movie that just takes one of those hours to go off and do something completely unrelated to everything else that's happening?
A 2-hour movie or a 9-hour movie where hour 7 is just like, yeah, this really interesting thing is boring. Let's just go divert for a little while and go hang out with a bunch of 80s stereotypes. Ugh. I'm glad about that episode, though, because it could have been a lot more annoying than it was. Because it could have constantly tried to make those characters seem like you're supposed to like them. At no point in that entire episode did it make any attempt for those characters to be likable. These 80s punk bank robbers are all obnoxious, bad people, and it does not try to... I feel like if this was a show on the CW, it would try to, insert more drama by being like, well, they're not all bad. Sure, they rob banks and murder people and steal from 7-Elevens, but, they're just misunderstood. That's something that Arrow would do.
Come on, man. Pittsburgh doesn't need this. It's already got enough problems to deal with, being Pittsburgh. So you don't need to punch him while it's down.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's not their fault they rob banks using the power of a telepath that they're, manipulating.
Mm-hmm.
But, aside from that, I understand the point of the episode. By the way, this is going to be a lot of spoilers on Stranger Things, too, so everyone be prepared. But I understand the point of the episode in that we're establishing things early for Season 3. Maybe even going into, backdoor pilot territory in case they want to just do a whole show about, the weird superpower people in the 80s, which might be a thing, who knows. But the thing that I think could have helped that episode was just framing it a little differently, so it wasn't just a hard stop in the story. We're gonna... Because, episode 6 ends with the creature coming out of the hole in the ground, and everyone's, panicking. And then episode 8 starts with that. it feels like we seriously just took a break and left to go somewhere else. Here's my suggested minor fix. It's because the plot has a lot of people kind of jogging in place for a few episodes, like nothing happens. Like, Eleven goes to visit her mom, right? And it explains that whole backstory in a little bit more detail than what we got in Season 1, which was nice.
Yeah, that was good. I liked that part.
But that took a lot longer because it was spaced out so unevenly. Like, it felt like there was a 40-minute gap between both of those cutaways, to that C plot. So, I think what they could have done is, just for editing's sake, put those closer together in proximity, and then have it implied that 11 leaves, like, early episode 5 or 6 or something. So she takes off, and then everyone's like, where's Elle? What do we do? Oh no, where's she gone? And then have it so instead of just being like, okay, let's take a break and go somewhere else, you could frame episode 7 as, here's what she was doing in the meantime. Instead of like here's where she was for the past few episodes, instead of just, here's where she was for like the past like hour while you were waiting to figure out where stuff was going with this. So instead of like leaving one story and going to another, it's like frame it like it's a flashback. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It would have just been slightly different. You wouldn't have had to change the episode order that much. It would have been more of just like an editing thing. And I think it would have helped that episode fit in a lot better and not be quite as annoying, because it would answer the question, where has she been this whole time?
But episode 7, I think, is part of the larger issue that I had with Season 2 compared to Season 1. And that episode is that problem is that it felt kind of bloated, if that makes any sense. I'm saying that Season 1 was a very strong, focused story. It was a 2-hour movie that they stretched into an 8-9 hour show.
But then you got a lot of development. There was nothing that felt like it was getting left unattended to.
If you ask me, it should have been a 2-hour movie, but as a 8-hour movie goes, it was pretty okay. And there were some things, to be fair, that you can't do in the 2 hours that you would have for a movie.
Well, I mean, I think it helps in that elongating it is in service of making sure that the entire cast gets at least a couple of scenes to shine. It doesn't feel... It feels like a really well-paced 8-hour movie as opposed to a very bloated 2-hour movie that it could have been. You could probably take all of that season and edit it down to a 2-hour thing. I don't think it would be nearly as satisfying, but I do believe that it could have been done.
But it was focused. It knew what it was about, and it did have digressions, but they weren't as bad. And it had a very strong cast, and it was an ensemble cast, but it wasn't too big.
Yeah. It wasn't like 50 people arguing for space.
And that's what Season 2 started to feel like. Because not only do you have Will, who you didn't have last time, but you also have Max, and you also have Max's brother, and then you also have the scientist guy, and then you have all the supporting characters in Eleven's side plot. So you're building up all these extra characters, and then it's like, oh yeah, we also have to see about the characters from last time.
Yeah.
So it was like my favorite episode of the whole second season was the first episode, because it was just such a strong. It was really good at bringing me back to the characters that I already knew and liked from the first season, and getting me invested in their stories once again.
Oh yeah, no, I think the first episode did a really solid job.
The first episode was the strongest, in my opinion.
I kind of wish that we had more stuff with the Upside Down this season. We only really saw it for a little while, and then we spent most of the rest of the time, like, the supernatural crazy location ended up being the tunnels underground in the normal world. But I think there's so much like you could do with the Upside Down that I really hope they return there for the next season. Because I think that's such a weird, strange concept, is like an alternate universe where, you know, stuff that we do in our world is consistent there, but stuff that happens there doesn't affect this one necessarily. Could you imagine, like, what if there was a whole society that lived over there? What if there was more than just, like, monsters? What if there was a bigger monster than even the one in Season 2? There's a lot you could do with it, and I felt like it was a kind of a missed opportunity to just ignore it so much.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the giant shadow monster was a mistake, because I'm not a big fan of just having a bigger monster as the bad guy, because a lot of the mystery in Season 1 was that you didn't know what the thing looked like.
Oh, so yeah. But this one, you see it every 5 seconds.
You see it every 5 seconds, and you're like, okay, I know what it looks like. Yeah, it's weird and big, but I'm not really all that scared about it. And then you see in a lot of detail the dog things, and you're just like, oh, cool, they're just CGI monsters. Cool.
Well, it takes away some of the you know, suspense when you see the creatures so up close so commonly. You know, every couple of minutes we end up getting another look at one of the tiny Demogorgon babies. I think you're right in that aspect, that it could definitely, like, reel it back and show us the monsters a little less.
Show us the monsters a little bit less, and don't jump the shark. Don't go too big with the monsters.
Here's a really dumb complaint that everyone's gonna think I'm an idiot for, but I was really disappointed that the giant monster was not a physical object, but instead was more like a big angry cloud. I thought it would have been cool if it was just a legitimate kaiju. Like, because you know how much I love that stuff, right?
Here's the question. If it's a cloud thing, then why did it need such a big portal to come through?
I mean, it inserted its entire body into Will Byers' mouth that one time.
So my more theory is that maybe it has a physical form that it needed to come through with the big portal. And then
so,
it can also go and possess people as well.
So, like, the big cloud monster thing is more of an abstract visual to explain its existence?
No, I was saying that there's the cloud monster that's physical, and then then it can send off little cloud bits that are actual, like, that's just possessing somebody.
Now, what does this have to do with the cloud monster in Lost?
I don't care. So I think that, I mean, one thing that I didn't like about the second season was, well, I'm saying a lot of things that I didn't like. So before I continue on my point, I just wanted to say that here's some things that I did like. I loved the characters. I loved the acting. Special effects were a lot better this season. I love the characters. I like the world. I feel like Stranger Things schools pretty much every other 80s retro throwback in how to do it, in that it's not about the references, it's just that that's part of their world that they live in. But the story is separate from the references. But more to my point, what was I talking about? I lost my train of thought.
What was I talking about? Do you think this one got a little bit more annoying with the 80s stuff?
It did. It got more annoying. It's like, oh, Ghostbusters, Terminator, VHS cameras, Radio Shack. I mean, Radio Shack was important because that sort of tied into the plot later on with Sean Astin's character.
No, yeah, I get that, but I feel like they had a lot more money for licensed songs that they had.
The songs were the thing that bugged me. Like, I mean, get it? You're watching an advertisement for Terminator on TV, and you're dressing up as the Ghostbusters for Halloween. Fine, but the songs did get a little bit annoying.
I mean, I liked more of the 80s synth score of the first season. I think the first season has one of the better TV soundtracks in recent memory.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I've got my point back. Is that I feel like a lot of what they were doing in Season 2 was following up on threads that they had from season 1, especially with the thing that Will Byers threw up. They're like, oh, we have to follow up on all this stuff that was part of the original movie, that was part of the original series. Pardon me. And then,
so it's an easy mistake to make.
And then, in addition to that, they're also adding this other stuff. So, I wish that they just expand the world instead of saying like, oh, we have to follow up on every single little detail that we established in the first season. It's like,
I appreciate that they didn't just leave plot threads hanging and then just ignore them. It always bugs me when I have the question, well, what about that thing? Did everyone just forget about that?
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree with you that they could have expanded it a little bit more. It felt almost like just a second half of the first season, you know? Like they just had so much to tie up. The only real new thing was that they added an extra monster, and even the rules regarding that are a little shaky.
I mean, pretty much for all they talk about the Shadow Monster, you see it about as much as you see it in the trailer, really. In the actual show.
I feel like it was in a lot of scenes. Like, I was hoping we would see it a little less. Like, it would be like this creepy...
It's like... I mean... It wasn't really all that creepy or interesting in that way either. It didn't really feel... You didn't feel like, oh no, what is it? That sort of mystery or sort of tension about it. It's just like, oh yeah, it's the giant tentacle monster thing in the sky. Cool.
I do think that they also had no idea what to do with 11 the whole season in general.
Yeah.
There was a lot of...
I'll agree.
She was just kind of there until the very end when she closed the door. Other than that, it felt like she was just kind of hanging around, treading water, just basically watching TV for the first 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
They could have had a lot more for her to do, but I get that they're trying to focus more on, I do think that it was cool to have Will Byers be more of a character this time around, because he was more of a plot device for the first season.
Yeah.
And now he's I'm surprised how good of an actor that kid is. Like, his performance was super solid. He was probably one of the better actors in the entire show, and it shocked me because I would have figured they'd have the least talented actor be the kid who gets kidnapped and you don't see a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
But no, really, that kid can hold his own. He was a lot of the scenes, especially later on, were really believable.
So here's the thing about 11. The one thing that I have with 11 now is like, what does she have to do with the rest of the story anymore? Because it's about this facility and the dimensional portal and the monsters on the other side, and then like 11's just kind of there.
She's just sort of this alternate entity. Like, it feels like she could have her own completely separate TV show.
Mm-hmm. See, I mean, especially because they had her in her own plot cul-de-sac where she couldn't talk to any of the other characters.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it's like, how did it, like, so the question is, was she the one who opened the portal in the first place?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess these are all questions that they can answer later on with like all this stuff, but I guess that's the thing, is that it felt like disjointed. Like, oh, we've got 11 doing her thing, and we've got Steve and the kids doing this thing, and then we've got Will and his mom and this character doing that thing, and then they all just sort of arrive at the same place at the ending.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a story like that where it's just a whole bunch of different plots that kind of converge at the end. But this time it did feel a little weird and shaky. Like, I think they did a better job of it in the first season because they had they had a lot more time for everyone to finally converge and be like, well, here's my deal. Well, here's my deal.
Because they didn't have as many characters.
Exactly. So this time around, it felt like, and I'm still kind of confused on the rules of the monster. Like, does the Shadow Monster have anything to do with the Demogorgon of Season 1? Was that thing like its pawn or just a random monster that was just killing dudes?
Yeah, I'm not as big of a fan of the Shadow Monster. It wasn't anthropomorphic, so you didn't feel there was as much intelligence behind it, so it didn't feel as interesting.
Yeah, I mean...
It just wasn't as interesting because it seemed a lot more of like the conventional evil monster from an alternate reality.
It seemed a little bit more like derivative of like Pennywise, except, without the sense of humor.
Yeah, in case you don't know, in Stephen King's actual universe, Pennywise is a giant spider who's the enemy of the turtle that vomited up the universe.
Yes, this is a actual plot from that book.
Yeah. So, basically, the Shadow Monster is Pennywise's alternate form.
I'm kind of excited for the next It movie on the basis alone of I want to see how they handle the giant spider scene and if they can make something, like, watchable out of that.
I think it's going to be bad. I think the It Part 2 is going to be bad. Because It Part 1 is the only part that people actually like.
Well, yeah, the children part. Everyone says, well, the first half of the story is really good. It's like, what do you do with the second half? It's a bunch of adults now. So and none of them get killed.
So you can't go from the angle of like, oh, it's children confronting the fears of growing up and all that. They're grown up now, and they're just going back home to...
They're just this weird group of, like, creepy adults who all have a weird...
Who all had sex with one girl.
They all have a weird semi-relationship with the one girl character, so... Like, everyone's really, really buddy with her. You think Stranger Things would be good if they took, like, a time jump?
How much of a time jump?
Like, what if they were like, here's these characters in the 80s. So they're all like in, like, all the kid characters are in high school and shit.
But they're in the 80s now.
No, I mean the 90s, excuse me, sorry.
Oh. Can't wait for all the 90s pop cultural references. Let's go and see Men in Black.
Hey dudes, look, it's me playing my PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I don't think they're going to leave the 80s for a while. Because the 80s are something that people have a lot more nostalgia for than the 90s.
I think 90s nostalgia is on the rise. I mean, it's not quite as marketable as 80s nostalgia yet.
Listen,
but
like,
we're getting there.
With us, with our generation, with millennials, there's this nostalgia with the people who who might have grown up in the second half of the 1980s and kind of remember this stuff, and the people who have synthetic nostalgia for this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then like you, who never lived a day of your life in the 80s.
But still, I love all kinds of movies and comics and video games.
When the people who didn't live through the 90s, like maybe people who are in high school or middle school right now, grow up, then they're going to have nostalgia for the time that they didn't live through, which is the 90s. That's my prediction. I'm probably going to be wrong, but that's my prediction.
I could see that maybe happening. Like a kid born in like 2007 just being super into like Pokemon or what's another big 90s thing?
I don't know. I've never really
I'm trying so hard to remember what was popular about the 90s, but I just
Animaniacs?
Kinda, yeah, that was pretty big. There was the Batman animated series.
Mm-hmm. The Michael Keaton Batman movies.
Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the GameCube and a GoldenEye on the N64.
No, it was the GameCube was a little bit later, but N64, yeah, I can totally see.
N64 with GoldenEye.
Definitely, that one was a big one. I think the most impressive and cool stuff about the '90s was just squarely the video games and the cartoons. Everything else kind of sucked. Like the movies were pretty bad.
Well, there are a lot of good Star Trek shows in the '90s.
That too, but the movies for the most part weren't great. Too?
Star Trek is the best part of the '90s. There was a great science fiction renaissance in the '90s with stuff like Babylon 5, all of the bajillion Star Trek shows, like Farscape, Stargate, all of this.
Fargate, Starscape, Battlestar Galactic Gate.
Well, that's more of a 2000 thing than a 90s thing.
Battlegate Galactic Far.
I sort of more associate Battlestar Galactica with, like, Lost and those sort of early 2000s programs.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because, like, Ronald D. Moore, who's co-creator of Battlestar Galactica, well, the new Battlestar Galactica, was a staff writer on The Next Generation.
Huh. You know, I gotta say, though, I do really like a lot of shows from the early 2000s.
Yeah, it was... Yeah, he recreated Battlestar Galactica from the really, really cheesy 70s show. Have you seen the 70s show?
Yes, I have, and I think Cylons looked cooler back then.
Isn't it just the most corny schlock you've ever seen?
And, not necessarily. I mean, it reminds me of a lot of other shows.
It is the corniest thing, though. Like, the costumes and the special effects and the acting is all just so 70s.
But the 70s was great. You know, we don't have a ton of 70s nostalgia bait, do we?
Well, here's the thing. The 70s weren't all that great. Well, in pop culture in the 70s, they had disco music. They had, they had Battlestar Galactica, the TV show. They had stuff like 70s TV is just terrible.
The 70s had a lot of really terrible horror movies.
1970s was really good in terms of movies. There was the whole like Hollywood New Wave stuff where people like Brian De Palma, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, all of those guys came in. Oh, and I'm forgetting the big one, director of
Ridley Scott.
Yeah, Ridley Scott too. Not that he's not who I was thinking of. Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah,
and all those guys were coming in inspired by like French New Wave in the '60s to add a little bit more art to movies. So movies were good in the '70s, but the rest not so much.
All I know from the '70s that I've heard from people who were there is that
there was MASH.
Everyone was wearing flannel t-shirts, or not flannel button-up shirts.
Oh,
there was wood paneling on every item ever.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was just constantly mad at each other.
My mom grew up in the 60s and the 70s. That should tell you how old my mom is, but she says the 70s were bad. She danced to disco music.
My dad was born in the late 60s, so most of his childhood years were in the 70s. He said it was just a really scary time.
Like, there was the fuel crisis as well. And like,
well, I mean, there was Vietnam.
Lest we forget, the 1970s gave us The Incredible Hulk, the TV show with Lou Ferrigno, and Wonder Woman.
Oh, yeah. There was also the 70s Spider-Man live-action show.
Wonder Woman! It's so bad. It's so bad.
Did they... I think I stayed specifically all the way through the credits of the new Wonder Woman movie, hoping they would put that in there.
I wanted that in there so much.
Even if it was during the actual movie, could you imagine that?
I would have clapped in the theater if they had played Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman movie.
Yeah, I would have too. It would have ruined any chances of box office success. Everyone would hate it. It would really only be for like dorks like you and me who'd be like, "Oh my god, they're playing the old cheesy theme." Everyone else would hate it. They would be so mad. The movie would get. They would cancel the movie after it was done.
The original theme is just 70s cheese.
I think there's a comic where 60s Batman hangs out with 70s Wonder Woman.
Oh, I love that so much. That sounds amazing.
I would really love also if Christopher Reeve Superman was involved in some capacity.
Oh.
I can't remember if that would be there, but just so you have the old Trinity, that would be great.
I think it says something about the time that Wonder Woman was the one who got a TV show, but the rest of them got movies in earlier.
Yeah.
Even Batman got a movie. He had a TV show too, but he had a movie that was in theaters.
I'm still so mad that that's the first Batman movie ever.
I love that Batman movie. The Batman movie.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
It's the movie where they dehydrate the entire United Nations, and then they go in a submarine that's shaped like a penguin and has penguin flippers instead of propellers, and then they fight on the submarine, and they fire torpedoes at the Batboat.
And then Batman has to use his bat shark repellent to get a shark off of him.
That's in the opening scene. That's where that moment is from.
I know. I saw it.
So many iconic Batman 1960s moments are in the movie. Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I want all of this to get... You see, here's the thing. I don't want Batman to ever be that cheesy and goofy again. But I do want at least, like, small references to that. Like, I wouldn't mind if, like, Christopher Nolan Batman just at some point had some kind of line of dialogue referencing the some days you can't get rid of a bomb or something. You could have the comics him like have someone make a joke about using bat shark repellent.
Or just have an Easter egg where in the back of Ben Affleck's Batcave you can see shark repellent.
Yeah, that would be great. It's just a spray can with a picture of a shark and then the no symbol in front of it, like the circle with a cross through it.
Yep. That would be... I would if Joss Whedon does not put that in Justice League, then there is no justice in this world. Or
there's no justice in this Justice League.
There's no justice in this world.
No justice?
You know, because Joss Whedon.
Are you coining the term Justice League?
Yes.
I am totally all for this. Let's do this. Hashtag Justice League.
Yeah,
he's Joss Whedon.
Let's try to make fetch happen.
That guy who really loves feminism. And he's really faithful to his wife.
Yeah.
I haven't checked Twitter for the past few months. Has anything changed with that?
Can't wait for the Batgirl movie directed by Joss Whedon, where he has a bunch of characters snarking at each other, and then the Batman shows up who murdered people in Batman vs. Superman and threatened to kill Will Smith in front of his daughter in Suicide Squad, and now he's like making the jokey jokes.
My superpower is that I'm rich. And then he winks at the screen, and then the audience goes, ha! It's just like a Marvel movie, ha!
This is the problem.
And then they all clap their hands like a bunch of like fucking dolphins.
This is the problem with the DC movies, is that
everyone wants them to be Marvel.
No, they have a tonal problem. Because they don't really have one guy who's saying, like, this is what it's going to be like, this is going to be the tone. I mean, granted, sometimes Kevin Feige I'm not going to say Feige, I'm going to say Feige from now on. Because Kevin Feige has decided that everything's going to be this way. He's a little bit too controlling sometimes, but at least he does have some control. Otherwise, there's
no middle ground. You get Marvel
there's just
movies
like weird tonal shifts where in Wonder Woman it's a more of a brighty, cheery origin story. Oh look, we're gonna do Captain America. We're gonna be so get people pumped up and be so inspirational. Oh, and in Justice League, we're going to be super drab and depressing. Oh, in Suicide Squad, we're going to have these characters just being absolute horrible people to each other. And it's just a tonal disconnect.
The problem is that, you see, with Marvel, there's got to be a middle ground, because Marvel is too controlling with the tone. The tone is too staunch and strict with staying exactly the same. You know, every movie starts to blend together in your head because they all feel so similar. But then you get the DC movies where it's like from one scene to the next, it can be like it's a totally different movie because it's trying to be so many things all at once. You know, they throw in these weird, like, jokey scenes with dialogue that makes you feel like they're trying to, you know, be like a Marvel movie. But at the same time, it also has all these, like, weird religious allegories and, like, really dark, depressing scenes of, like, ultra-violence and all this death.
I still think one of the better jokes in recent Nostalgia Critic stuff was the bit in his Man of Steel review when he just had the guys in the background shouting, "I am Jesus! I am Jesus!" That was good.
Every time Superman stands still and raises his arm out like he's on a cross.
Or goes to church and is superimposed on a frame with Jesus in the background.
And there's sun rays coming through the window pointed at his face.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't hear your obvious subtext. You need to turn up the volume until I can't hear it enough, until I can't avoid hearing it. What is it? Is this person Jesus? I never could have told. I never would have guessed unless you'd shouted into my ears all this time that he's Jesus.
You know, and yeah, you get stuff like that where it's trying to be really deep and metaphysical and metaphorical, and it's trying to have something going on under the hood. Now, I appreciate when movies try that, but not when it also then immediately cuts to a scene of, you know, just like something really dumb happening. You know that.
Oh yeah, Superman is so hot. Ha 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 ha.
You cut from a scene of Superman, you know, doing all this crazy, awesome superhero stuff and being like inspiring, and the people at the in the Day of the Dead festival putting their hands on him like he's some kind of god, or this montage of him saving people all over the world. And it cuts to this really weird out-of-place scene where Lex Luthor is just shoving a Jolly Rancher in some dude's mouth, and it's supposed to be, like, funny, but it's just kind of coming off as weird. And, like, it's not cringy, but it's just not getting a reaction. The audience is just like, what am I supposed to be feeling right now? They just need to stabilize it, because you can have I would rather the DC movies have... Here's the DC movie that's going to be kind of fun and lighthearted. It's Shazam. You know, he's a 10-year-old who becomes a grown adult and has superpowers. That's funny. That's cool. You could have a really lighthearted Marvel kind of tone with that. Then you have the Batman movie. Well, it's a Batman movie. Make it more like in the same camp as like The Dark Knight. Don't try to switch from scene to scene to those kinds of tones.
The jokey jokes.
Just have... Here's our movie, here's our tone. Don't keep hopping around.
And also, when you have characters that are being shared between the different movies, it's kind of weird to see them portrayed very differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
I mean, you
when
kind
you
of
go from, like...
You kind of give Wonder Woman a pass because, I mean, in Batman vs. Superman, it is basically a century afterwards. So you're like, yeah, whatever. You've changed in 100 years. I'll bet.
Yeah, no, that's excusable. But when you go straight from Batman v Superman to Justice League, like, I bet, even though it's been like a 2-year gap, right, or maybe about a year from one movie to the other, It feels like a long time ago when BVS came out.
2016.
Okay. When
It
you
was
watch
a
those
March.
with like a year gap in the middle, it probably isn't that noticeable. But if you were to sit down and marathon these movies, Batman's personality is going to shift so hard into such a weird left turn from one movie to the next.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go from this like everyone keeps talking about how he's this broken, jaded man who has no belief in justice anymore. You know, he thinks that the world is cruel and the only way to fight back is to just murder everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Superman kind of gives him hope off screen, I guess. And then it's
by needlessly killing himself, despite the fact that Wonder Woman's right next to them.
just give her the fucking spear.
Easily.
She was successfully fist fighting Doomsday for several minutes.
And then one said,
she
like,
cut
hey,
off
look,
his hand.
Wonder Woman, go grab the spear for me, please.
Or how about this?
Or
Just
when he
have,
goes
like,
and grabs it, just hands it to her, and it's like, I'm gonna die if I hold this for too long, so you grab it.
she probably even knows how to throw a spear, too. I mean, in the Amazon island, they train with all kinds of weapons, right?
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't even had to get up close. She would just, like, toss it from far away, and it
You
would
distract him.
pierce through his eyeball, and he'd be dead.
You just sort of distract him with a laser beam or something, and then she throws a spear, and then you're done.
Yeah. So, anyway.
And then, of course, also, it's like the whole Martha thing is just so dumb because, like, the world of Batman vs. Superman is a world where people don't say things that they would say in real life just so you can have punchy punch moments.
Mama. No one at any point has, like, a normal conversation where they just lay out what they want or what they think.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's too busy speaking in good lines for the trailer.
Yep.
Tell me, do you bleed? You will. That's a really good line for the trailer. In terms of progressing the plot, that's fucking bullshit. You know?
Yep.
Or the bat is dead. Bury it. It's like, come on! You've known him for like 5 seconds. Maybe talk about things a little. Go, hey, I just want to do the right thing. I'm not your enemy. I just want to help. And then Batman could go, helping by destroying the city. And he could go, well, I wasn't trying to, I swear. We all make mistakes. You know that better than anyone. I mean, you just murdered a whole bunch of people with a car. And then Batman could be like,
can you please leave? I'm gonna cut that out.
And then Batman could be like, well, yeah, I guess I did just kind of goof up real bad, like break my whole moral code. It's frustrating when the central conflict of your movie can be avoided with like a 2-minute conversation.
Yep.
If anyone would just sit down and talk to each other, just say these very, very minor things about what their motivations are, it would make everything so much easier. I guess that's the problem with DC movies, is that, it's just like, they try so hard to be artsy and creative and like...
And then they hire Zack Snyder.
And they always end up getting so, like, far up... Like, their head gets so far up their own ass about how artsy and perfect they are that they forget to just, like... act like a normal movie. Like, the people in the movies stop acting like normal people because it's trying so hard to be like some kind of crazy awesome metaphor for, like, you know, Greek mythology or some kind of Jesus allegory or something.
Lest you think we're just Marvel fan boy people, let's talk about Disney a little bit. How about that?
Oh, sure.
Because I've got some stuff I can talk about with Disney that's not ideal either. So
like the tickets thing?
Well, we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about Disney and the Los Angeles Times.
I haven't heard about this at all. You apparently wanted my live reaction to something.
Okay, it's not necessarily a live reaction because I'm just going to talk about it with you. But the Los Angeles Times, they're, a paper, a newspaper, and they've got critics that review movies, right? But they can't see Thor Ragnarok, because Disney has barred their reporters from press screenings of those movies.
Yeah.
So, do you want to know why?
Why?
Oh, well, Disney, put simply, what was it? They actually the Los Angeles Times actually did what a new journalist should do, and they reported things.
Yeah.
So, they talked a lot about, Disney's relationship with Anaheim, California. You know, the city near Los Angeles?
Yeah?
Where they talked about, is Disney paying its fair share in Anaheim? Because apparently, the relationship between the city of Anaheim, and is it Disneyland or Disney World? Whichever one.
Which state are we talking here?
California.
Oh, California? That's Disneyland.
Okay, so Disneyland in Anaheim, California. And the subtitle of the article is Anaheim's Subsidy Kingdom. Because the article opens talking about the Disneyland parking lot, the 10,000 space parking garage, and then each vehicle pays like $20 to park and $35 for a preferred space. And Anaheim, the city of Anaheim, owns the parking facility, and they had they spent like $100 million to build it. But guess who gets all the revenue from this parking lot?
Disney.
Yep. There you go.
Well, they sure know how to do their business good.
So basically, what Disney has been doing is that Disney has been sledgehammering Anaheim with all these like threats of, we're gonna move this investment somewhere else, and we're not gonna build here. We're gonna build somewhere else if you don't give us tax incentives. So basically, so they've just been sucking more and more money out of the city doing that stuff. And of course, Disney in retaliation has been like, yeah, well, we don't like your journalism, so you don't get to see our movies.
Oh. Yeah, no early screenings for you, bastards.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go and see it with the unwashed masses.
You'll have to go see it with those normies that don't have press passes.
And it goes even deeper than that. The article talks a lot about how Disney has basically been manipulating city politics, and it's been lobbying. No, not been lobbying. It's been paying campaign donations of over $1 million to city council members.
Good Lord.
I mean, that $1 million in local politics, that small. City council members. I mean, granted, Anaheim is a city of 350,000 people, but still, city council. It's not. That's a lot of money for something so small.
Yeah.
So it basically I mean, we don't talk about this stuff a lot in terms of our show because we're mostly a movie show, but it's interesting to see how, like, it's also because remember, you know how a lot of movies shoot in like Vancouver and Australia and New Zealand and Britain. You know,
it's easier to get the tax breaks on a couple of those.
You get tax breaks. So so basically, in order to attract shooting companies back here, California, New York, and Georgia have basically started doing the same. So there's this whole new thing of basically paying for them to do business with you.
There's a lot of really sleazy tactics in place.
It's not just in Hollywood as well. Like, perhaps you read about about Foxconn, the electronics manufacturer, getting $3 billion from the state of Wisconsin for building a factory there.
I had not heard about that, actually.
Billion.
With a B.
with the B.
Ugh. It's easy to forget that Disney is like this horrible, evil company just because they provide such cool shit,
And they have such a wholesome image.
No, yeah, no, no one ever looks at them and goes, "Hey, they're kind of the devil."
If you don't know, Walt Disney was a capitalist with a capital C.
He
That's
was
the way
also
I look
other
at it.
things that people still like to bring up a lot.
Yeah, but he was also a big believer in capitalism and I'm gonna earn all the money and that sort of idea of things.
Yeah. Can we talk about the ticket thing though? Because that's probably like the most egregious example. Like that's really terrible.
That's another example about it where Disney being sleazy part 2 is that for the privilege of Disney of exhibitors, movie theater companies, AMC, Cinemark, Regal, you name it. In the United States and Canada, basically, they've been Disney has been telling them, yeah, normally we get like 50 to 55% of the ticket price, and you take the rest.
Yeah.
But because our movie is so big that you can't afford to not have it in your theater.
No, you'd lose.
You're gonna get 65. We want 65% instead of 55%. We want more.
So they're basically robbing the theaters and going, well, it would cost you more money if you just didn't play the movie, so you have to.
The exhibitors have to. Like, it's worth it for the popcorn alone, was a quote from the news outlet that I read this in.
It's kind of horrible that they've just bullied theaters into, like, taking half of, like, way more money than they ought to, and they're just going to get away with it, because no one can really just say, no, don't do that. It's Disney. They own the world.
There's also a big, interesting interesting history behind this, because back in the day, in the 1930s and 1940s, there was no difference between exhibitors, movie theater companies, and production companies, movie studios.
Yeah, the studios just showed their own movies.
The studio owned until the United States versus Paramount Pictures, which broke that up, and that ended the so-called golden age of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And since then, they've been separate companies. AMC is publicly traded, but it's also majority owned by the Dalian Wanza Group, and all this stuff. Most of these companies are publicly traded on Wall Street, and that's what a lot of people forget when they're talking about the box office, is that they assume that when you buy a ticket, all of that money is going to Disney. Now, really, typically in the United States, we have one of the highest percentages in the world already. You get 50 to 55%. You're lucky if you get 25 to 40% in China, and rest of the world averages around 40%.
Part of that is also because China has some really weird, sleazy tactics to kind of sabotage movies they don't like, where they'll just start...
They don't let your movie... They have a quota of foreign release movies in there, and if you're a foreign movie, you only get 25% of the ticket proceeds if you're lucky. If you're not, then a distributor will just buy the rights from you, and then you'll get a flat fee, and then they get all the profits. Or you can be a co-production, which gives you native status. Like, you work with Alibaba Pictures, blah, blah, blah.
Which is how we get stuff like The Great Wall.
And then you get 40% of ticket prices in China.
Okay. Boy, this conversation got a little bit more complicated when we were talking about movie tickets and whatnot. But you get the point. Basically, Disney is a creepy, evil company that does shady things to keep getting more cash.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And that's why they're so successful.
Yes. And there's nothing we can do about it, and the world is going to go on anyway, and they'll continue to get away with it forever, because that's how it works.
Especially under our current political climate. Not to get political, but historically Republicans have been very business friendly.
Yes.
So let's talk about some non-business crappy stuff. Let's talk about everything wrong with CinemaSins videos. How about that?
All right.
That's easier. That's a lighter path. We can everybody here can agree that they're terrible.
That's a little bit out of left field, but sure, I guess.
Well, I have a list of topics that I want to talk about here, and I'm just sort of coming to. We're at the end of that discussion, so why not talk about something else before conversation gets awkward and pausy? Because both of us are tired. So
I'm very tired. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to talk? So I love how So basically, a bunch of people, there's been this sort of growing backlash to CinemaSins videos where people are like, Jordan Vogt Roberts, director of, what's its name, one of those monster movies?
King Kong.
King Kong, Skull Island.
Island.
He went on a long Twitter thread about how CinemaSins is terrible, and then, this YouTuber called Sean also does a bunch of everything wrong with videos where he just points out a bunch of all of the errors in the videos that he says, and the point behind that is that it's supposedly satire. We meant for it to be terrible, but they don't really frame it as satire. They just sort of frame it as, oh look, here are problems with the movie, and you're just sort of nitpicking endlessly, which is kind of a bad way to watch a movie, because a movie is by definition an illusion. It's a fabrication. So we're supposed to suspend our disbelief and just sort of go yeah, okay, so here's the world that we're in. Let's see if I can absorb myself in the world, and if the problems are too pronounced, then you can't. And that's when the proper sort of nitpicking goes along, when those problems are pronounced enough that you can't invest yourself in this world. But otherwise, you're just nitpicking pointlessly, which I used to do a lot, but I try to avoid now.
Fair. Well, yeah, I think that's the problem, is that the lines are so blurred now between what exactly counts as satire and what's just doing a shitty video. When it comes down to it, if you say you're gonna do a review of something, and then you just spend a whole bunch of time complaining about really dumb things that shouldn't be complained about, as some videos have pointed out, it's just well, that's not really a continuity error. That thing's just establishing a thing later in the plot. That thing's just a nitpick that you can really easily excuse. There's just a lot of stuff throughout those videos that they rag on that, in the end, doesn't really amount to any actual criticism of the film. It's just, let's just bitch about tiny details that are actually totally excusable if you think about it more than not at all.
There was also a good video that I watched of Bob Vids, which is a YouTuber, I think, who talked about everything wrong with The Cabin in the Woods. How he just sort of nitpicked it like it was a regular horror movie, despite the fact that the whole point of the movie is that it's making fun of horror movies.
It's trying to be satirical at satire. So it just becomes this weird double negative and instead completely unwatchable.
It just shows that they don't really get the whole satire, the point. Plus, there's the weird sort of creepy elements where he says this scene does not have a lap dance, and this girl is hot on screen.
Yeah.
So, I get it. Yeah, you get it, whatever, you're a guy, you like girls, but when you just point it out every single time, it just gets a little bit creepy and weird.
There's a certain point where it just starts sounding like, I don't know, almost insecure. I have to constantly reaffirm my sexuality with the audience, or else they'll just ask if I'm gay. Is that the problem? Is that why you keep bringing it up?
Looks like this guy has a case of the not gays.
I gotta make sure he has a case of the not gays that needs to be treated.
Yeah, that's one of the better bits that in the Plinkett reviews.
Oh, definitely. I love that. I love that part. Who has a case of the not gays and needs treatment immediately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone should go watch those reviews. You're done with this, go check those out. Those are great.
And also watch some everything wrong with videos, because those are good too. I think it's important that we need to start thinking about the way we do online criticism. because back when newspapers were the only way you got to read a review about a film, there was some sort of standard there about what how you talk about things and what you talk about, blah blah blah. There was a standard there, the journalistic standard. But when they're just random idiots like you or me talking about movies on the internet, we need to have a larger conversation about what this means and what kind of discussions we're going to have. Because yes, there's people who have film studies degrees and talk about these things very intellectually, but then there's also Collider and Screen Junkies and Chris Stuckman and all that stuff where they just talk. Oh, and Jeremy Johns too. They all talk about movies in a very loose way, and I feel like a lot of their reviews, they don't really say anything. They just talk about the movie.
Yeah, well,
they don't have any sort of discussion or criticism.
There's not like a giant point that it's building up to. It's mostly just, here's some stuff that was in it.
And plus, there's just channels, like I already said, Screen Junkies, but I also dislike Screen Junkies because there's also the fanboy echo chambers, like Screen Junkies.
Yeah. Well, Screen Junkies is literally just around to reaffirm whatever is the most popular opinion at the time.
I cannot watch movie fights because that is just 5 people going, oh, look, here's what's popular, cool.
Yeah.
It's so obnoxious. I hate podcasts with more than 3 people on them.
Well, because then it just becomes like a bunch of different people yelling, and it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Especially when when the title of the podcast is movie fights, where you're all fighting with each other.
Oh yeah, well because that's the whole point. It's just a giant 5-person argument.
They're always talking over each other the whole time, and that's the whole point of the video. It gets a little bit tiresome after a while.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I get that. I think just in general, the whole movie review scene on YouTube kind of needs like a revamp. It seems like, it's too easy to let stuff like, Screen Junkies or CinemaSins become the standard, where there's very little actual thought put in. There's not much work put in anymore into like doing like a really long, in-depth analysis video. Like some people do it still, of course.
I mean, but there's stuff like Red Letter Media where they do that, and they do more casual stuff. But when they do more casual stuff, you're not supposed to think as critically about it because they're just really terrible movies.
Yeah. With
best of the worst. And then there's of course stuff like what's her name? Former nostalgia chick Lindsay Ellis has been doing a bunch of
Lindsay Ellis does good stuff. Yeah, that's another good example.
I mean, I don't like all of her stuff 100% of the time, but it's clear that she thinks about things and puts a lot of effort into it, which I can appreciate.
Yeah.
And there's even lesser stuff that I'm not as big a fan of that I can respect for, hey, look, you've got actual editing and writing and, like... I mean, also, I think that a problem with the Screen Junkies format is that their videos are so short.
Yeah.
Like 4-minute honest trailers...
There's not a lot of really legitimate criticism you can get in a 4-minute
You can just make some jokes and say, yeah, the movie's good or the movie's bad. Haha, here's some jokes.
Yeah. Well, but like when you get like CinemaSins, it's just a lot of that seems it seems like they're padding out the length of those ones. A lot of those probably could be like a 4-minute quick just here's some jokes about the movie.
Do you remember the first few CinemaSins, like the early ones?
They were like 3 minutes.
They were all under 10 minutes, and then now they're
pushing 25 on the regular.
Let's see. I'm on their channel right now. Let's see. Bad Moms, 18 minutes. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, 19. Saw 4, 16, 16, 16, 18, 17, 15, 19, 17, 11. Oh, that's a short one. 14, 17, 18, 25. 18, 18, 17.
Okay, we get it. They're way longer than they need to be, and a lot of it is just padding out the length just so, you can...
Scene does not contain a lap dance. What's the criticism there? What's the point of that?
I don't want to just accuse them of making the videos longer in order to get
to favor the YouTube algorithm?
Both to get past the algorithm and also to be able to put in like a mid-roll ad. But it seems sometimes like that's where we're going, It just like there's a lot of neandering. It's just like, hey, look at this thing in the background. Doesn't that remind you
Plus,
also
there's a
kind
lot
of
of
like
bits
this?
in these videos where they just there's a lot of points in their videos where they just like, wait, what about this? And then it's something that they show or they explain later in the movie, and it's clear that they don't watch the movies more than once, so they don't go back and get rid of the
if they have
initial
if they have a
reaction.
sin about something that doesn't make sense in the first act, even if it's explained later in the movie in a very blatant scene, they don't ever really seem to go back and like remove that thing.
When people don't explain things, then then they criticize them for not explaining things. But when they do have explained things, then they criticize them for having too much exposition.
It's really just how can we nitpick this until the video is long enough for the algorithm to like. It's quality. It's quantity over quality. There's very little thought put in. It's more so just a lot of just saying whatever you can. I don't know. It's hard to explain it in a really concise way. It's saying the dumbest thing possible so you don't have to really put a lot of work into it.
You know what I think about both CinemaSins and Screen Junkies that they have in common is that whenever I finish watching either of them, I feel like I haven't. Let's do a metaphor. So it feels like I've eaten a meal, but I haven't eaten anything at all.
Like you just spent like an hour just shoveling air into your face.
Exactly.
And it felt like you were eating something as it was going down, but then at the end of it you're like, "Oh my god, I'm really hungry."
Exactly, that's the point. It's empty calories, if that's a metaphor that makes any sense. There's no intellectual. There's nothing to think about behind the surface. There's no point to the videos. It's like, what real criticism does everything wrong with do? It's just like nitpicking. There's no point behind it. And with honest trailer videos, they have jokes, and jokes sometimes, I'll admit, I like them better than I like CinemaSins because at least the jokes are sometimes funny.
Yeah.
But still, there's no point to it behind just making jokes.
True. Hey, how long have we been going? Hold on, let's see. Hour and 13, huh?
Hour and 14, yeah. So,
Jinx. We coughed at the same time. You owe me a soda.
It doesn't count when we're coughing instead of actually saying something.
Okay, well, do you think we should cut it off about here? We've been talking a lot. That was a pretty long stream of consciousness sort of conversation.
And we didn't talk about the thing.
No, we didn't talk about the thing. All right, do you want to do that next week?
Yeah, let's put it off and let everybody's heads cool a little bit.
Okay, everyone's a little riled up right now. We'll talk about that thing when everyone's chilled a little and, not quite as ready to yell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
We will see you on the flippity flop, whatever that is.
We'll see you in the next podcast video where we talk about
subject
things.
to change.
Isn't there several other podcasts named Subject to Change? Someone at school told me the other day that there's a whole bunch of them, and I haven't been able to find any, but
go on Apple Podcasts or something. I don't listen to. I don't know. I haven't found any others, but then again, I just Googled it, so. Okay, I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, God, I hope there's not a billion podcasts with our same name.
Podcast. There's something on podcasts.com. There's something on TuneIn. Card subject to change. There's a bunch of links for something called Card subject to change.
Okay.
We don't know what that is.
I don't know either.
Card to subject the
Card to subject the change subject. What a great name.
Yeah. CST. Oh, their Facebook page is not visible, so Subject to Change podcast.
Well, anyway, we'll see you around next week, everyone.
Subject Change podcast. The Subject to Change podcast is a verbal potluck in which every participant brings a different subject to the table. No subject is off limits, and the participants are subject to change. Except that there haven't been any since December of 2016.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, since that podcast is technically dead, it's like totally up for grabs, right? Like we can just...
There's card subject to change on the iTunes store, except it doesn't want me to look at that on the website, and I don't have iTunes on my computer. Listen via Stitcher, card subject to change, the podcast. Well, the most recent episode of that was August, so I guess that's a bit more current.
But still, that's a pretty long time. That's like...
Card subject to change, the podcast feed. Yeah.
Okay, the name is ours.
Fastlane review, WrestleMania, whatever. I don't think it's as common as people think it is.
Okay. Well, because I was like so excited because I was like, man, that's a really cool name. I'm glad I came up with it. It sounds clever.
Card subject to change Twitter does not exist, so I think it's dead.
Okay, well, I mean, just like there's like a film review blog from 2012 called Cautiously Realistic.
Yeah.
And the last thing they talked about was when Avengers was releasing, so, that name's up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's another Godzilla Mendoza out there.
Or maybe there will be in 20 years once you're dead.
Oh, okay. Wait, what?
Because you're going to die in 20 years.
Oh, I'll finally get killed by Dan Slott.
Who says it was going to be Dan Slott?
Could be you.
Yeah, I thought I was going to do it.
Alright, well... If it was at least you who killed me, I'd know that at least you'd, you'd do it the right way. You wouldn't kill me in a way I wouldn't enjoy.
So you want me to do autoerotic asphyxiation until you die?
On yourself?
No, I'd do that on you.
Well, that's what the word auto implies, is self. I know.
Well, I'd just give you the rope to do it, and then I'd rig it to die, so you did it on yourself. And then I rigged
What,
it
are you
so
just gonna stand outside the door and be like, are you done yet? And I'll be like, yeah, totally. And you're like, damn, he's not dead yet. Like, I think if you want to go about it that way, you'd have to get a little bit more involved than just, like, handing someone the rope.
So I'd have to do it to you? To sort of choke you and it turns you on until you die?
Why did we get to this?
Well, how else would I kill you in a pleasurable way?
I was just thinking you could just kill me with, like, a really cool guillotine.
But the guillotines are painful.
They're really quick, actually. Or, I don't know, I mean, your head still stays alive for a little bit.
Well, what about, like chopping your head off with an axe, except by somebody who doesn't know how to do it, so it'll take a while?
So he just hit you in the shoulder, like, 6 times first?
Yeah, and then he'll hit you in the head, and then you start bleeding. But then he'll hit you in the neck, but he didn't cut through the bone, so you're sort of bleeding out, and then he hits you again. So it'd basically be like chopping a really bloody log.
So what if it's like a really dull axe? So even if it is a
dull,
good
rusty
swing,
axe.
it only just cuts the skin.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be here all day.
Oh, jeez. Killing people is hard. Just don't do it, everyone. Do not recommend.
So you've tried it personally, so you know?
See you next week, everyone. Ending the recording now.